Tank on Tank is a game that came out a couple of years ago, around 2010 I believe, and it is an introductory war game, introductory to tank warfare. The game is set in World War II, and also it can be used as a general introduction to wargaming in general. Published by Lock and Load. The idea, as you can see, was to have a game that was portable and affordable, so not only easy to learn but also accessible to many gamers. The counters were traditional size, good looking, with outlines of the represented units, action chits, and the game came with a set of maps, single-sided maps, fairly small and pretty basic, but they definitely got the job done in that they will show you the relevant terrain features. So that was the original game that has recently been re-implemented, remade by Lock and Load in a deluxe version. I should say 2 deluxe versions. Now we had 2 sets that came out with much better boxes. The original box was unbelievably flimsy. Now we have 2 boxes, sturdy, good-looking boxes, and we have 2 sister-brother games, West Front and East Front. Tank on Tank, West Front, and Tank on Tank, East Front. Let's have a look at them. First we'll have a look at the components, and we'll talk about the system. We have a nice-looking manual now. We have counters that, as you can see, have considerably grown in size from the original. Look at this. Oopsie. Come on, Panzer IV, come here. As you can see, we have much larger counters. They're not super thick. I would say actually probably they are as thick as the original ones, but the original ones were much smaller, so the proportions seem to be better. But they're sturdy, colorful, good looking. Something that I'm a little torn about is the silhouette of the tanks. Yes, they look good, but the game does have orientation, does have facing, which means when you place a unit in an X, it means where it is facing. The 3 top X sides that the unit faces are the front of the unit, the rest are the rear. And when you have facing of that kind, having top-down illustrations, while they are clearly less attractive, is something that is more effective because it makes it easier to remember where the tank is actually facing. With the silhouettes, not so much. When you think basically that right now, just to show you what the matter is, right now, these 2 tanks, you see the 2 silhouettes, if they were on the board, these 2 tanks would be facing exactly the same direction, which is not what seems at first sight when you look at them here. So we have new counters still with the silhouettes like the original ones, and then we have maps that are much larger, more detailed. The art is not as Spartan as before, and each map is double-sided with a spring, summer side, and a winter side. So larger and better looking. This is an area of player age. So this is the stuff that we find in the West Front set. And the East Front set, which again is the same game but set on the East Front of World War II, this set has more stuff in it. The basics are still here. We have the manual, which again is printed in larger format, colorful and nice looking. We have counters and more here, more counters and more playing pieces that we have in the West Front. And they represent, oh gosh, the baggie was open. There are Soviet tanks everywhere, including on the floor right now. Oh well, tanks happen. Falling tanks and open bags happen. So we have the Soviet tanks here. Again, lateral representations of the silhouette instead of top downs, which I would prefer, and a big bag, which is still luckily enough of enemy tanks, of Axis tanks. Maps, more maps here, well, more sheets of paper and more maps too, because the maps here are larger in the East Front set, and you place them adjacent to one another to form a single map. So really nice looking, much larger, more tactical options, larger engagements are possible here. And again, we have the two versions, the summer, spring, and then the winter version for the maps. Same here. With this other double map, and we have another double map here. We have a quick look at this one, and then we talk about the mechanics and basic rules of the game. Here we go. So, as I said, it's two sets basically of the same game. The game is super simple. It still is, even in the new version, that is still to have a game that can be used as an introduction to wargaming. You can play with a young perspective gamer, with somebody, casual gamer, who never really gave a thought about wargaming or thought that wargaming meant incredibly detailed and complicated stuff. That doesn't have to be the case. Now, units in this game are represented by these counters here. A lot of these units are tanks, hence the name of the game, but then we also have personnel and other types of units which work slightly differently. But clearly the tanks are the main protagonists of the story here. Units have three values printed on them. One is range, up to which they can attack. The other one is defense, and the last one is movement factor. Yes, there is no fire factor or attack factor printed on the tanks, because what really matters in this game, the design decision that was made here was to emphasize concentration of fire. So what really matters is not so much how powerful a single tank is against another tank, but the number of tanks that are firing at a single opponent. We'll talk about that in a second. Now, the game works with an action chit pull mechanics. There are action chits that are placed in a container at the beginning of the game. Then they are drawn randomly throughout the game. Something unusual here is that if you're playing the game in the standard version, which is two-player, non-solitaire, it is your opponent that draws your own chit. Chits will tell you how many action points you receive and you can spend in a turn, and that number is between 2 and 4. However, as I said, the opponent draws that for you. The opponent looks at the number of action points that you have, and you don't. You don't know how many you have. You just know that you will have between 2 and 4. That means that you start spending your action points, and you spend one, and then you spend a second one, and you don't know yet whether that is the last that you have or not. The opponent tells you, okay, you spent 2, you still have some. So you can spend a third one, and then the opponent tells you if you still have a fourth one or you're done. That means you will have a minimum granted number of action points each turn, but you do not know exactly when a turn is going to happen. I like that idea. It's a pretty abstract system, but it does simulate all sorts of uncertainties, unpredictable things, fog of war, lot of unpredictable factors that are good in a war game. I don't mind a good degree of unpredictability in war games. If you're playing the game Solitaire, it is still playable. All you need to do is simply you spend 2 action points normally, because you know you always have those. Then you roll a die. On a roll of 1 or 2, then your turn is over. That simulates what would happen if you had drawn a 2 action point chit. If you do not roll 1 or 2, you spend a third action point, then you roll again. And that determines if you have, whether you have a fourth action point or not. Now, what do you do with these action points? Easy. You can spend an action point to activate a single piece, single unit for movement, up to its movement allowance. Movement expenditure of movement points is affected by terrain, of course. Or you can use an action point to activate any number of your tanks to fire against enemy units, as long as the enemy unit is within range and line of sight of the firing units. For example, with a single action point, I could activate these 3 units to concentrate fire against that guy. We have a little hill here. Just let's do it this way then. Here, like this. These 2 units can fire against that enemy unit right there. Orientation, see, is not obvious. There you Action point to concentrate fire against an opponent. So basically the action point is not spent on a single unit, but more like on the target that draws as much fire as possible. It is also possible to spend an action point to promote a unit. If you have an headquarter and the quarter is eliminated, then you can spend an action point to promote another regular unit and make it into an headquarter, turn it into an headquarter. It's field promotion. Important thing here, as I said, it seems hard to move a large number of units because it takes a full action point to move a single one, but you could choose to activate a headquarter, in which case then you can activate all units adjacent to that headquarter for movement. So as long as units are around their headquarters, they're able to move en masse, and then when they start spreading around, they move individually, which is more expensive in terms of action points. There's the general idea. As for combat, super simple. You roll dice, you add possible modifiers or subtract modifiers based on terrain, modifiers based on concentration. Of course, the more people are firing on an opponent, the better. There are a couple of other modifiers that come from different things, such as weapons, angle, things like that. But the basic idea, the golden rule, is that once you have an attack roll and you've applied all the modifiers, if you have exceeded or met the armor factor of the opponent, you have eliminated the opponent. Boom, it's an either-or thing. Pretty brutal. As I said, this is a game that's supposed to be introductory, so it doesn't look into a lot of details, doesn't have a lot of details about possible damage that reduces the performance, Nope, you are okay and working at 100% of the functionality of the tank, or you're not there at all. These are the basic rules that are shared by both West and East Front, but there are a couple of differences, and really West Front is very close to the basic system. What I told you is almost all that there is. There are just a couple of minor modifications. It is with East Front that you have some special rules to simulate specific aspects of Soviet warfare. In particular, the problems that Soviet tanks had to organize and perform combined attacks, which are so important in this game. So what you have here is that there's a limitation that Soviet tanks have, and that says that they have to be adjacent to one another to be able to combine and concentrate fire against an opponent. The Allies in West Front and the Germans in this game, in both games, do not have the limitation. They can be anywhere on the board as long as they have line of sight and within range. They can fire. They don't need to be adjacent to one another. The Soviets do. But the Soviets can also have another advantage, which is they can choose to spend 2 action points to activate 3 headquarters and all units that the headquarters can activate. So they can create sort of like red horde effect, the red wave. And, well, you activate a lot of headquarters together that can create, in fact, quite an impact. And the game is played by scenarios. Each set has a section of the rulebook devoted to scenarios, and also there are instructions to create your own scenarios. Now, how about the game? How does Tank on Tank in general play? To talk about the system. The system is one that I liked the first time that it came out. Definitely I enjoyed it. It is simple, super simple. Simplicity is the key word here, and simplicity is both the strongest suit and, for some players, certainly the weakest element in this design. It is an introductory game that doesn't assume or pretend to be anything else than a simple introduction, something that you can play with a young gamer, with a casual gamer, something that does give you some basic ideas about wargaming. It teaches you some of the key elements, movement, range, orientation, line of sight, stuff like that. It really can help you train somebody with these basic concepts and ideas. And these are concepts that are used in so many games that, in fact, when you become familiar with them, then they can be used and they can be of benefit when playing a lot of different war games. The game, even for an experienced wargamer, as long as the wargamer is okay with dropping the level of detail and detail and realism a little bit, so it is a game that is still fun and entertaining to play. Of course, with that either or factor, a unit is destroyed or not destroyed. You don't have reduction, you don't have steps, you're gonna have disorganization, suppressed units. You're okay or you're not there. That's a pretty steep thing, which does add a lot to the random element. If you roll poorly in another game, or if you roll very well, well, you inflict some damage, but it will take a lot of good rolls to inflict some really significant damage on the opponent. The opponent may come back. Here, if you have 3 or 4 super lucky rolls, then you will inflict such a huge damage on the opponent. You will remove such a number of units that basically that will be enough to tip the scale of the battle. On the other hand, the game is easy to set up, is quick to play. If Lady Luck does take control of your game entirely and you feel like you weren't in control, you weren't the protagonist, you set up the game again. And maybe Lady Luck again will take over, but you know what I mean. It is a game that you can easily play a couple of times in an evening, I would say even in an hour, and that will allow you to, sooner or later, find games in which you will experience a satisfying balance between your personal skill and the decisions that you make, and on the other hand, the luck of the roll. So it's simple. I think it gets the job done. It gets the job of teaching you about wargaming done, and for experienced wargamers, it also definitely allows you to have a break from the biggest stuff that you usually play. Allows you to have a filler wargame, a game that can be played satisfactorily and can be enjoyed as long as, again, you are looking for once in a while for a simpler, lighter game. It looks good, the components are nice, they definitely look much better now than they did before. That also makes it a little less approachable. When the previous idea was that probably a teenager could just buy it easily, because the game costs so little, but also didn't look like much. Now we have a deluxe version, it looks much better. The game is basically the same, and it is still entertaining. It was entertaining at the time, it still is. Overall, I like these two sets. I prefer the Eastern Front simply because of the larger maps, and because I really like just the little extra chrome that you have thanks to the rules that apply to Soviet units. But either set really is a good starting point for any aspiring wargamer, or in any case, a good diversion for a wargamer that wants to have a little bit of light fun here and there. And now I would like to take a moment to thank some backers of my Kickstarter campaign for 2015. Through their donations, they made this video and other videos possible. In this video, I want to thank Ian McCluskey, Todd Jeffcoat, Thomas Lass, and Roger Mark. Thank you to the 4 of you in this video for donating to my campaign, and thank you all of you, my viewers, for watching.